Hello, everybody. My name is Jim Babcock. I'm the project manager of Outcome Campus Connect and the Student Work Placement Program here at Magnet. I'd like to thank you for taking your time today to run through this program with us, an exciting new initiative that we're really happy to be a part of. I see we may have a couple more people sort of jumping in as we get along here, but I think that's okay. I want to start with a couple of housekeeping items here. We're going to be running about 30 minutes for this webinar today. That'll include the presentation and then an opportunity for some Q&A. I will ask that throughout the presentation, if you do have any questions that you'd like to have addressed, please do put them in the chat, in the Zoom chat box there. My colleague Haley will be curating those for us to run down at the end of the meeting. And last point is that we will be recording this webinar today for use later on for us in marketing and outreach and posting on our website. So our agenda for today, I do want to go over the Student Work Placement Program as a whole. I'm not sure how much all of you know about the program, but I want to give you an overview of what the program is itself. And then I'll jump into what Magnet's Student Work Placement Program is all about and how it differs from the other programs. I'll run through the criteria for program funding for employers, students, and the placement itself. And I'll talk about a little bit about participating in the program, how an employer would apply for funding, and how that works. And then finally, I want to introduce you to Outcome Campus Connect, which is another exciting project funded by Employment and Social Development Canada that we were awarded in September. And that project is highly related to the Student Work Placement Program in that its goal is to develop an ecosystem for work integrated learning opportunities across Canada. So I'll talk a little bit about that at the end and leave you with a little something to take away. And then we'll finish up with some question and answers. So a little bit about the Student Work Placement Program itself. SWP is the acronym that seems to really get around. It's Student Work Placement Program is an initiative funded in 2017 by Employment and Social Development Canada. And its aim is to support employers and students across Canada in accessing work-integrated learning, or WIL, placements. Many of you would know these as co-ops or internships, apprenticeships. There's a number of forms that a work-integrated learning placement can take. The program was expanded in 2019 to include a number of new initiatives. And that's number one, to ensure that work placements are distributed across Canada, across provinces and regions. Increasing the number of students from non-traditional programs receiving these experiences. Non-traditional being outside of your typical co-op or internships in a tech or engineering placement, really trying to engage students across all institutions from all programs. And finally, increasing the number of students accessing these placements that identify as belonging to one or more of the underrepresented groups as defined by Employment and Social Development Canada. And those include women in STEM, Indigenous students, immigrants to Canada within 5 years, persons with disabilities, and first-year students. The program's main driver is providing wage subsidies to employers to create new work-integrated learning placements. There's been a lot of great research done about how students involved in these placements are more successful after graduation. And so with that research in mind, the government wants to incentivize employers to hire more students than they would have been able to otherwise. So under the program, employers can receive 50% of the wages for each qualified placement to a maximum of $5,000, or 70% of the wages for each qualified placement that involves a student from an underrepresented group, as I had mentioned before, to a maximum of $7,000. The program is administered by a set of delivery partners that were approved by ESDC, and those are listed here. They include Information Technology Association of Canada, Eco Canada, Venture for Canada, BioTalent. Each of these delivery partners run a program in their respective industries. Magnet Student Work Placement Program is designed to complement these other funding delivery partners. We really want to fund placements that don't naturally lie in these other industries. And we've designed our program to support a diverse range of students from programs across Canada. So this includes students that are from STEM and non-STEM disciplines, full-time, part-time students. We want to be very flexible in administering qualified placements that haven't previously been funded under the program. I'm going to jump into the criteria for the program itself. The program has eligibility criteria for both parties of the placement. So that's the employer, the student, and the placement itself. You can find a full list of the program criteria at the website. It's swpp.magnet.today. And I always encourage people to write us at swpp@magnet.today with any questions regarding specific cases around eligibility. So the first component of the eligibility is around the employer. So an employer that is eligible to participate in this program must be a registered Canadian business or nonprofit. It cannot be a federal, provincial, territorial, or municipal government. They must be committed to paying the student for the role. So it can't be an unpaid internship or other words. And they have to have the financial capacity to pay the student for the duration of the placement, as the wage subsidy is administered at the end of the placement. So it's not an ongoing contribution that starts when the student is hired. There's actually a review, an initial review for the program, and once approved, the placement is carried out, and the funds are then administered at the end of the placement as a reimbursement. Students eligible to participate in the program must be registered as a domestic student in a recognized post-secondary institution and within a program that has a work integrated learning component. So this can take a number of forms. Most commonly, you would know as a co-op or an internship. Some students require a certain amount of hours to complete out in a community placement or in a work placement to receive their academic certificate or degree. The student must be a Canadian citizen, permanent resident, or person whom the refugee status applies. So they cannot be an international student. And they must be legally entitled to work in Canada in accordance with the provincial territorial legislation. The placement itself has four main criteria. The placement in order to be eligible for funding must be, quote, net new placement. And what that means is that a placement must have been created under this program. In other words, an incremental position over and above what an employer was able to hire the previous year. So an example there, if last year an employer was able to hire 5 students, and this year they're able to hire 6 or 7 or 8, they would be eligible for funding for that 6th, 7th, and or 8th placement. The placement funding can be stacked with provincial tax credits, but it is up to the employer to know the guidelines around the tax credit requirement. I know here in Ontario, the main distinction there is that you can't apply for tax credit for funds that came from a governmental source. So if you were to receive 50% of the wages from the student work placement program, you would only be eligible for a tax credit on the other 50% that an employer had paid out of pocket. A placement can only be funded by one student work placement program delivery partner. It's really just to ensure no double dipping. And finally, the placement can be funded in part by government funds from other sources, whether they be provincial or municipal. But likewise with the tax credit, the student work placement program funding can only be used to subsidize funds that are coming directly from the company or non-governmental sources. So for an employer to participate in the magnet program, we first want to make sure that they understand and ensure they meet the eligibility criteria before they start an application. And once they are assured that they're eligible and their student meets the criteria, they've got to have the following things ready to get their application going. The student would be hired with a start date during the term for which they're applying. So the fall term, September to December, and the winter term, January to April. We still do have a number of placements left for the fall term to fund. So we do encourage that any opportunities that are currently existing out in your networks, they could be eligible for funding. We do have a deadline, December 16th for that. The employer must have the job details ready, including the job description, salary information, etc. All the information you would typically find on a job posting. And finally, some information about their organization, including how many students they hired in the previous fiscal year, so that April to March period, so that they can know how many students they would be eligible under the student work placement program. The initial application process takes only 20 to 30 minutes once it's started. And there's 6 main steps to get to that initial review and approval. We are currently using the SurveyMonkey Apply product, which is a forms-based product here in Canada where data is kept on Canadian servers. And it's really meant to automate the process for ease of administration and application for the employer, for the student, and for us as the delivery partner. When I talk about Outcome Campus Connect a little later, I'll talk a little bit more about how we're going to be shifting to a new system where we're going to be merging recruitment and administration of the student work placement program into one streamlined technology solution. Once the employer has their account created, they can review the privacy statement that disclaims how the information that they produce or that they provide will be used, and that we respect the Information Privacy Act, etc. They will confirm their eligibility in the program by checking off those criteria, making sure that they are eligible and that they are claiming that they understand the criteria. They will complete the employer and placement information. So that's the information about their organization, about the job, about the student. They'll invite the student to complete their part of the application as well. There is a number of data points that have to come directly from the student, including the self-identification as one of the underrepresented groups. And when that's all complete, they will review and submit that completed application to us for an initial review and approval. Once we review the application and check off that they meet all the criteria and that it's a legitimate placement, we would then give them a conditional approval, at which point the placement would be carried out until the end of the placement. And that decision would be made within 2 to 4 weeks. So we are processing these on a first come, first served basis. And right now we are taking much less time than 2 to 4 weeks. But at peak periods, we do expect that we will need that time to process applications. So after an application has been approved, there's an employer placement agreement to sign. They have to upload the proof of payroll. So that's a pay stub for the student to prove that they have been hired and they are paying them as expected. They complete a vendor form with Ryerson so that we can process the wage subsidy payment at the end of the placement. And then at the end of the term, the end of the placement, they'll upload the final pay stub that they issue to the student, which would include the total gross salary that they had been paid for that term, and an invoice for the subsidy amount based on the calculation that we provide. So I mentioned previously that the employer is going to be reimbursed under this subsidy. So once all of this is completed, the subsidy would be processed typically no more than 45 days after the completion of the placement. So as I mentioned, applications for the fall are still being accepted. We do still have a number of placements left to fund that can start as early as September 2nd or 3rd, I believe, the Labor Day weekend, the Tuesday after the Labor Day weekend. Employers can apply for the program by going to our website, swpp.magnet.today, where they can also find information on criteria for eligibility, a list of frequently asked questions, and the link to apply and start their application. I do also encourage people to contact us directly by email if they do have any questions about their specific case around eligibility. We'd be happy to review that and get back to them. So I did mention Outcome Campus Connect, which is another project that Magnet was awarded by Employment and Social Development Canada. And I want to touch on it briefly, just because I think with this audience, there's a lot of relevance in this project over the coming years. Outcome Campus Connect is a network and in partnership with Orbis Communications and Magnet. Orbis Communications has been in the post-secondary educational technology market for nearly 20 years and has an extensive market, an extensive network of post-secondary institutions. Last year, we piloted with an initial investment from Employment and Social Development Canada, the connection of the Magnet network with Orbis's network of post-secondary institutions. And that really enabled an employer to post their job only once and have it distributed to multiple institutions on the network all at once. That initial pilot started last year, and we saw some success with that. And the program has been expanded as of September this year, and we'll be building out the platform to not only connect students with employers across Canada, but also support the student work placement program application process and administration. Really the idea being that an employer or post-secondary institution can connect in one place and to work on a job posting as well as the funding, saving a lot of time and data administration. The second aim of the platform is to develop a holistic look at the WIL ecosystem across Canada. There's a lot of great insight and knowledge that can come out of knowing where connections are being made, by who, with who, in what industries, and for what skills. And third, to grow the number of work-integrated learning placements and opportunities for post-secondary students across Canada. So really working with schools that have very robust and long-lasting programs and co-op and internships. The Outcome Campus Connect project is going to be available for post-secondary institutions, students, and employers for free to connect with opportunities, to share their opportunities, and for post-secondary institutions, a free technology platform to manage these opportunities if they don't have one already. There will be a number of other ways to leverage these opportunities, and that includes an API that we're working with Orbis was released in November. Documentation was released in November. So if you are a Simplicity school or you have another third-party provider or a homegrown solution, you can still leverage Outcome Campus Connect by feeding those opportunities from the network down to your students. And another great thing about the platform is that it will provide access to a real-time data dashboard for institutions and their participation of their students in that data. There will be an anonymized set of data that will be available for free, and under a data sharing agreement, access to more detailed information about students and employers. So this program is, as I mentioned, just launched in September, and we're working towards a new release, an update on the technology in January, which is really going to streamline the posting process for employers and the administration of those postings by institutions, really melding the current processes that a school might have in developing a job that comes in from an employer under their existing methods with Outcome Campus Connect opportunities. So if you are interested in more information or to register as an Outcome Campus Connect school, you can contact Natalie Nitsopoulos at Orbis Communications. Got her email here. Feel free to reach out to us directly afterwards if you do have more questions or need to get Natalie's email directly. And I would encourage you to reach out to us if you do have any questions that you come up with later today or over the coming days about the program. Feel free to write us at swip@magnet.today, and one of our staff will get back to you as soon as we can. So thanks again, everyone, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.